The mountain should have been silent, but the wrong kind of silent. No birds, no wind. Then Tango froze, every muscle locked, staring at the cabin's floorboards, as if something beneath them was breathing. "Easy boy," Lucas whispered, though his pulse was already climbing. A faint metallic click answered him, then another. Rhythmic, intentional. He stepped back, hand drifting toward the knife on his belt. Tango growled, a deep warning sound Lucas hadn't heard since the desert. The boards vibrated once like something trapped underneath had finally decided to move, and Lucas realized his grandmother never told him who else lived here. Lucas's hands shook slightly as he gripped the railing, eyes fixed on the floorboards. Tango wouldn't leave. Every instinct in his body screamed, "Don't step forward," but curiosity, and something deeper, something tied to the bloodline he barely understood, pushed him toward the threshold. The cabin smelled of old pine dust and the faint, iron-tinged scent of something hidden. Rain streaked the windows, turning the light gray and thick. Outside, the mountain groaned under the weight of wind and clouds, but inside the cabin felt alive, listening. Tango's gaze flicked between the boards and Lucas, urging him, warning him. Lucas knelt slowly, fingertips brushing the edges of the planks. A second metallic tap answered him, deliberate enough to make his heart seize. He swallowed hard, realizing the cabin's quiet wasn't emptiness, it was waiting for someone to notice. Lucas's mind flashed to his grandmother, the stories she never told, the room she locked. Whoever or whatever was under that floor had been part of her secret all along. And suddenly the question hit him, was he really alone in discovering it? Lucas Reddick stepped inside the cabin, boots crunching over the thin layer of pine needles scattered across the floor. The air smelled of damp wood and old smoke, faintly sweet like something burned long ago. Tango padded silently beside him, nose twitching, ears alert. The dog had always been more than a companion. He was a partner, an extension of Lucas's senses, the only constant Lucas had trusted through years of chaos. Lucas let the door close behind him, the latch clicking like a tiny punctuation to the silence. His eyes traced the room slowly, a faded rug, the fireplace cold, a few chairs draped in dust covers. Light filtered through cracks in the shutters, painting thin stripes across the worn floor. It was quiet, almost reverent, and Lucas felt a hollow tug in his chest. The kind of quiet that could be comforting or threatening depending on the way you listened. He ran a hand over the scar along his forearm, a pale line left from shrapnel in Helmand. The memory surfaced unbidden, the heat, the mud, the acrid smell of spent rounds. His chest tightened. Even here, surrounded by mountains and rain, those echoes followed him. Tango nudged his leg, grounding him. "Yeah, buddy," Lucas murmured. "We're here." But nothing simple, is it? He pulled the duffel from the passenger seat and laid it down gently, careful not to disturb the thin layer of dust. Flashlight, first aid kit, sidearm, everything in its place. Lucas worked methodically, the same way he had in the field, every motion precise, controlled. It was a rhythm he trusted, a rhythm that kept panic at bay. The cabin had a strange personality, Lucas realized. Every corner, every beam seemed to hold a memory. His grandmother's presence lingered, not oppressive, but measured, like someone watching over the house from a distance. He imagined her here, moving silently, sorting papers, keeping secrets. He'd heard stories, fragments, but the truth had always been withheld, wrapped in caution and time. Rain tapped steadily against the windows, a soft percussion that made the cabin feel both isolated and alive. Lucas moved toward the small kitchenette, unpacking a canteen and a tin cup. He poured water over a camp, stove the hiss and steam, breaking the silence. Tango sat nearby, head-cocked, eyes following every flicker of movement. Lucas felt the weight of his solitude press against him, but he didn't flinch. He had learned long ago that isolation sharpened perception, made him capable of noticing the small but vital details. A quiet grace note entered his mind. A single beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, striking the corner of the fireplace mantel. Dust motes danced in it, slow and deliberate, as if time had paused just to show him that even decay could hold beauty. He exhaled, letting a small, rare smile touch his lips. For a moment, the mountain didn't feel threatening. It felt patient. He crouched by the uneven floorboards, fingertips tracing the edges of the planks Tango had already inspected. Memories tangled with anticipation. Every sound, every subtle shift of air was amplified by his training and his own unease. The mountain seemed to be breathing around him, and yet despite the tension, Lucas found clarity in the stillness. Here with Tango and the ghosts of his family, he could finally begin piecing together a life disrupted by war loss and secrets. The first task was simple in concept, but heavy in weight: understand the cabin. Its layout, its history, the traces his grandmother had left behind. Every shelf, every photograph, every corner might carry meaning. He ran his hand over a faded photograph of a younger woman in uniform, her gaze sharp and serious. Lucas felt a pulse of recognition, a thread connecting past and present. Tango shifted beside him, a gentle reminder that he was not alone in this. Outside, the rain fell harder now, streaking the windows with thin rivers of gray. Lucas straightened, feeling the mountains press close their slopes, dark and impenetrable. The dog looked up, ears forward, as if sensing what Lucas could not yet name. The cabin was alive, with more than memories. It was waiting. And Lucas understood deep in his chest that this waiting was not passive. Whoever or whatever had left their mark here was patient, clever, and watching. The mountain was quiet but not empty. Lucas stood and let the flashlight beam roam across the room, lingering on details that most would overlook: the grooves in the floor, where chairs had scraped the faded ink on an old calendar pinned to the wall, the small scorch mark near the fireplace that looked accidental but was too precise to ignore. He ran a hand over the cold wood, feeling the texture beneath his fingers, the uneven grain, the tiny splinters, the weight of years pressing down silently. Tango padded close, brushing his shoulder tail, stiff but relaxed enough to signal trust. Lucas exhaled slowly. The dog's presence reminded him that he was not alone, that instinct and loyalty could cut through uncertainty where logic faltered. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the shutters and pressing the pine scent deeper into the cabin. Rain hit the windows in heavy streaks, making the forest beyond look like a smear of gray and green. The mountain felt alive, watching, breathing, waiting. He crouched near the fireplace, fingertips tracing the edges of the uneven floorboards again. Each plank seemed to hum. With history, and with every scrape, Lucas felt the pulse of his grandmother's hidden life. Memories rose unbidden mornings in his small apartment in Cedar Ridge, the smell of coffee mixing with gun oil, the hollow spaces left by years spent chasing orders, fighting shadows he couldn't see. Tango nudged his hand, a soft reminder to stay grounded, to focus on the here and now. Lucas murmured, "Yeah, buddy, we've survived worse." He moved slowly through the cabin, touching shelves lined with dusty books, opening drawers that groaned under his fingers. Every object told a story, every layer of dust, a note in a symphony of absence and presence. He found an old photograph of a woman in uniform, sharp-eyed and composed. The nameplate read H. Reddick. Lucas felt a flicker of recognition, a connection across time, a thread tying him to secrets he was only beginning to grasp. In the corner, a small porcelain cup had survived decades. He picked it up, warmed it in his hands, and inhaled the faint scent of tea and pine smoke. A quiet grace note in the storm of his thoughts. Even in abandonment, something human had persisted, delicate and patient. He smiled faintly, a reminder that survival wasn't always loud or violent. Lucas paused by the window, looking out at the mountains folding into fog. He could see the winding trail slick with rain leading toward the summit. Somewhere up there lay the rest of the story, hidden, waiting, dangerous. He ran a hand over the scar along his jawline, traced the line of his old Marine tattoo on his shoulder. Years of service had left marks beyond the skin. Shadows lingered in corners of his mind where only Tango seemed to know the path through. Tango sat alert, head tilted, following Lucas's gaze. The dog's eyes mirrored his own anticipation, their shared history, a silent language. Lucas crouched, brushing the dog's neck. "We're ready," he whispered. The cabin was no longer just a shelter. It was a map, a clue, a container for truths that demanded discovery. He moved to the staircase leading to the loft, stepping carefully, feeling the wood give slightly beneath his weight. Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the roof. Somewhere between action and reflection, Lucas allowed himself a rare thought. Perhaps the mountain's isolation was a gift. It gave him focus, a chance to connect with Tango, to remember who he was, beyond war, beyond loss. He reached the loft and swept the beam of his flashlight across the space. Old crates, folded blankets, and a thin layer of dust coated everything. Yet the air vibrated with potential. Every sound, the creak of a floorboard, the patter of rain, Tango's subtle shifts felt amplified. Lucas inhaled deeply, absorbing the smell of pine, old smoke, and something metallic faintly present in the air. His pulse steadied. For a moment he simply listened. The forest beyond whispered secrets. The mountain exhaled slowly, and Tango rested his head against Lucas's knee. A quiet grace note, a tether to humanity amidst the weight of what was hidden beneath these floors. Lucas realized the cabin was a vessel, preserving the life of someone who had lived with courage and caution, whose choices had shaped not just the house but the man he had become. He crouched again, running a hand along the floorboards, feeling the subtle swell of one in particular. A vibration, or was it intention? He didn't know yet. But he understood something fundamental. This cabin, this place, and Tango at his side were not merely witnesses. They were guides, mentors, and warnings all at once. The mountain had chosen to reveal its truths carefully, and Lucas was listening. The rain outside thickened. Lightning flashed briefly behind the clouds, painting the loft in stark white. Lucas exhaled slowly, letting the tension flow through him and out. The dog lifted his head, eyes shining with awareness. The journey had only begun. Somewhere under these boards, secrets waited. And Lucas knew as he straightened and brushed off his knees that uncovering them would demand everything: skill, patience, and the kind of trust only a lifetime with Tango could teach. Lucas crouched near the uneven floorboard fingertips, brushing the edges again when Tango stiffened abruptly. The dog's hackles rose tail rigid, and a low guttural growl rumbled through his chest. Lucas froze. He could feel the pulse of danger, subtle but insistent, threading through the cabin. A faint vibration ran beneath the boards. It was small at first, almost imperceptible but rhythmic, deliberate. Tango's eyes locked on a single spot near the hearth. Lucas swallowed hard, recalling every lesson drilled into him during long nights in Helmand. Trust your senses, trust your instincts, even when your mind doubts. He reached for the flashlight, casting a narrow beam across the warped wood. Shadows danced, magnifying the silence. Then he saw at a tiny gap where the boards did not meet evenly, as if something or someone had been moving beneath them. A faint metallic scrape followed, sharp and cold. Lucas exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the plank. "All right, buddy," he whispered, voice low, steadying himself. "Let's see what's under there." Tango's gaze never wavered, a silent agreement. He nudged Lucas's hand with his nose as if to say, "You're not alone." The moment was suspended, heavy with anticipation. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, rain tapping faster against the roof. Lucas ran his fingers along the gap, feeling the faint hum of pressure from below. Each sound, each shift reinforced the reality. This was no accident, no forgotten relic. Someone had left a trace, and it was waiting to be discovered. Lucas glanced at Tango, who crouched slightly, muscles, coiled eyes alert. Decision time. He could back off, chalk it up to old floorboards and nerves, but every instinct screamed against retreat. He had come this far, he had survived worse. And beneath those planks lay a secret that would change everything he thought he knew about his grandmother, about the cabin, about the mountains themselves. With a careful breath, Lucas positioned himself above the gap. Knife in hand, flashlight in the other, he made a deliberate cut at the edge of the board. Tango stayed close, body tense, ready to act, ready to warn. The plank gave way with a muted groan. Beneath it was darkness, tight and enclosed, smelling faintly of earth and metal. Lucas's pulse quickened. He knelt, peering into the shadowy cavity. And in that instant, he understood this discovery was not just a curiosity. It was a call to action, a threshold crossed. The journey that had begun with curiosity, with memory, now demanded choice and commitment. Lucas's hand lingered over the edge of the floorboard as he probed the cavity below. Darkness swallowed the beam of his flashlight almost immediately, yet a faint glint reflected off something metal at the very bottom. Tango sniffed intensely, ears swiveling, growling low. Lucas's pulse spiked. The dog's instincts were never wrong. He reached for a small pry bar in his pack, wedging it carefully between the plank and the floor. The wood resisted, but only briefly before giving way with a soft crack. Dust puffed into the air motes, dancing in the flashlight beam. Lucas inhaled sharply, scanning the shadowed interior of the cavity. Inside lay a small rectangular metal box, tarnished but intact. Tango pawed at the air, signaling both caution and urgency. Lucas knelt, heart hammering, and lifted the box carefully. It was heavier than expected, cold and smooth. The corners were stamped with initials HR, familiar yet enigmatic. He ran his thumb over the surface, feeling the indentation of decades of secrets kept meticulously. The cabin groaned as if reacting to the disturbance. Rain streaked the windows, with increasing intensity, wind rattling the shutters. Lucas straightened, holding the box close. The questions rushed in. Why had his grandmother hidden this? What did it contain that required decades of silence? He glanced down at Tango, who stared up with steady amber eyes, tail sweeping softly against the floor. The dog had been right. There was more here than wood dust and memories. Lucas opened the box slowly, each movement deliberate, muscles coiled. Inside were stacks of yellowed papers, photographs, and a small folded leather pouch. His breath caught at the sight. The papers were filled with ledgers, handwritten notes, and official stamps, all marked confidential. Names repeated over and over, some familiar, some unknown, weaving a web of responsibility, loyalty, and betrayal. He leaned back slightly, scanning the photographs. One depicted his grandmother younger, standing in uniform beside a group of men, smiles faint, serious eyes fixed on some distant point. The annotations hinted at post-war relief efforts, projects meant to help veterans but clearly mismanaged. Lucas swallowed hard. His grandmother had carried this weight alone, hidden it beneath the cabin floor for decades. A sudden creak above made him snap upright. Tango's ears twitched, body rigid. The cabin was silent again, but the silence was taut, expectant. Someone or something had sensed the movement, the discovery. Lucas's mind raced. Every plan, every instinct from years of service sharpened to a razor's edge. He had reached the threshold uncovering this secret. Demanded action, demanded courage. With a steadying breath, he gathered the contents of the box into his pack. Tango brushed against him as if lending reassurance. Lucas exhaled, scanning the cabin once more. The floorboards beneath them, the walls lined with dusty books, the distant roar of the mountain wind, it all pressed on him, urging him forward. Lucas realized the cabin was no longer just a home for memories. It was a starting point, a threshold between what had been and what must be revealed. The decision settled firmly in his chest. He would follow the trail of his grandmother's secrets no matter where it led, no matter what waited above and below these mountains. Tango barked softly, a subtle confirmation. They were ready. And in that moment, Lucas understood the truth. The discovery wasn't merely about history, it was a summons, a challenge, a reckoning, and he had no choice but to meet it head on. Lucas hoisted the metal box onto the workbench, brushing away dust and grime. Tango paced nearby ears, swiveling with constant vigilance. Every sound, the creak of a floorboard, the snap of a pine branch outside, even the rhythmic dripping of water from the roof heightened their alertness. Lucas had been trained for danger, for chaos, for life in environments where silence could be as deadly as gunfire. But the cabin held a different tension, a pulse that wasn't immediate threat but looming consequence. He opened the first envelope, revealing neatly folded papers with numbers, dates, and initials. Each sheet was a puzzle piece. The more he examined, the more he realized this wasn't just about finances. It was a ledger of loyalty and betrayal, a record of promises kept and promises broken. Lucas's fingers traced one faded signature, a shorthand he recognized from his grandmother's careful handwriting. The weight of responsibility pressed on him. The past wasn't simply a story, it was a call to action. Tango nudged his leg-low growl, vibrating through the dog's chest. Lucas looked up, catching the flicker of movement outside the window, just the corner of the tree line swaying as though something or someone watched. He exhaled slowly. Every instinct told him that the mountains weren't empty, that their isolation had its own watchers. He adjusted the flashlight beam, scanning for shadows, but saw only fog curling around the pines. Lucas leaned back, letting his mind drift briefly. A memory surfaced: Afghanistan, a desert ambush, his squad pinned down under fire. He remembered Tango, then a younger dog, alert and unflinching, saving him more than once. That same instinct now guided him through the quiet storm of Silver Peak. Tango wasn't just a companion. He was a compass calibrated through years of survival loyalty engraved in muscle and bone. Another envelope revealed photographs, veterans receiving aid, piles of supplies, hands exchanging documents. Dates matched entries in the ledgers. Lucas felt a pang. The weight of his grandmother's courage, the secrecy she maintained had been enormous. She had acted alone, keeping accountability alive while avoiding ruin for herself and others. The cabin's floorboards beneath them suddenly felt like the threshold of a much larger revelation. A metallic click echoed faintly beneath the bench. Lucas froze. Tango's tail, stiffened eyes locked on the floor. He knelt, hand resting on the dog's back. "Stay sharp," he murmured. Together they crouched over the gap under the hearth. Lucas pried gently at the hidden latch, revealing another shallow cavity. Inside was a small pouch, leather soft but worn edges frayed. He unrolled it carefully, revealing a set of keys and a folded map. Lucas exhaled, tracing the contours of the map. Red X's marked locations deep in the mountain notes, scribbled in a hand he immediately recognized: precise, deliberate, patient. This wasn't just a ledger. It was a guide, a series of instructions spanning decades. Every mark pointed toward hidden caches, evidence long protected. His pulse quickened. The implications were massive. The secrets of his grandmother's life were now his to navigate, and the trail would not be easy or safe. He paused to reflect. Alone in Cedar Ridge, he had believed the mountains were only quiet expanses of pine and rock. Now he understood their real nature: protectors and sentinels holding truth in their shadows. Tango's soft whine reminded him to stay grounded. The dog's instincts were tuned to what he couldn't yet see. Lucas ran a hand over his jaw, tracing the scar from an old firefight, a tactile reminder that he had faced danger before, but nothing like this. Outside wind picked up, rattling the window panes, carrying scents of damp earth and pine resin. The forest whispered, alive with unknowns. Lucas realized that uncovering the next layer would demand both patience and courage. Every movement, every sound, every decision had weight. Tango pressed against him, eyes bright and unwavering. Together they were a unit trained in vigilance, trust, and survival. Lucas took the first step toward the mountain path marked on the map, laying out supplies carefully: flashlight, water, pocket knife, and the metal box. Tango sniffed each item, circling, tail flicking. The dog's behavior was deliberate, signaling readiness. Lucas smiled faintly. It was a quiet grace note amidst the mounting tension. They had survived war zones, ambushes, and isolation, but now the battlefield was a labyrinth of memory, secrecy, and the legacy of his grandmother. A sudden gust of wind rattled the cabin. Lucas exhaled, feeling the hairs on his arms rise. The mountains loomed outside, fog hugging the slopes, hiding potential threats and guiding him forward. He glanced at Tango, amber eyes meeting his, and knew that the journey would demand everything: intellect, instinct, and the kind of courage that honors both the living and the dead. He paused to breathe, letting the tension seep through his shoulders. The smell of wet pine and cold stone filled his lungs. Somewhere deep, a memory of childhood summers in these mountains surfaced: rushing streams, sun-warmed rocks, laughter echoing through the trees. A quiet grace note, fragile, reminding him of why he had returned, not just to uncover secrets, but to honor those who had come before him. Lucas adjusted the pack on his shoulders, checking the box and map one more time. Tango whined softly, brushing against his leg tail, sweeping in rhythm with his heartbeat. The cabin silent now seemed to lean in, as if listening. He knelt briefly, running a hand down Tango's back. "Ready, boy," he whispered. Tango barked once, sharp, decisive, then padded to the door stance, alert. Together they stepped toward the next chapter, an ascent that would test every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage Lucas had left. The mountain waited, silent, patient, and unforgiving. And somewhere beneath its shadow, the truth of decades long buried pulsed quietly, daring him to uncover it. The first steps on the mountain trail were cautious. Gravel crunched under Lucas's boots, water pooled in ruts carved from decades of rainfall. The fog clung to the trees like a living curtain, thick and suffocating. Tango padded ahead, nose twitching, scanning every shadow. Lucas followed closely, hand brushing the pack containing the metal box and documents. Every instinct screamed vigilance. Halfway up, the path narrowed between moss-drenched boulders. Lucas paused, chest rising and falling rapidly. He glanced at the map. Another X marked a ridge, above labeled in his grandmother's handwriting: "Watch for signs, follow the hidden." He traced the line with a finger. The handwriting was precise, almost clinical, yet carried a subtle warmth, as though she had been whispering instructions from the past. A sudden gust rattled loose branches above, sending pine needles fluttering down. Tango froze, ears, pinned muscles taut. Lucas's pulse quickened. There was a smell, faint but metallic, mingling with wet pine. It wasn't natural. The dog growled low, a warning he had only heard in combat zones. Lucas swallowed hard, reaching for his sidearm strapped beneath his jacket. Every shadow became a question. Were they being watched? Or was it the mountain playing tricks? Hours passed in tense progression. They stopped only when the trail leveled near a cliff edge overlooking the valley below. Lucas sank to one knee, catching his breath. He unfolded the latest set of documents from the box. Receipts, codes, and letters traced decades of misappropriated relief funds. The names repeated: generals, officers, contractors, but one stood out, appearing over and over: Kane. The weight of recognition struck him. This was no small mismanagement. It was deliberate, decades-long corruption. Tango nudged the papers, tail-stiff eyes fixed on the tree line. Lucas leaned back, exhaling slowly. She had carried this alone, he thought, hidden everything to protect us and the truth. A memory surfaced: a younger Lucas watching his grandmother tend a small garden behind the cabin, humming quietly to herself, distant yet unyielding. The juxtaposition of that innocence against the magnitude of the secret now laid bare crushed him with guilt and awe. The wind shifted, carrying a whisper of movement, footsteps perhaps, or just the forest settling. Lucas stiffened. He looked down at Tango, amber eyes unwavering. They were no longer alone. Lucas's mind raced through strategies: approach, observe, retreat if necessary. He tightened his grip on the pack, feeling the metal box under the straps. The mountain wasn't just terrain. It was a sentry. Midpoint revelation struck as Lucas pieced together dates and locations. The X's on the map corresponded to old relief supply caches, now long abandoned, but evidence suggested someone had been using them recently. A surge of realization hit. His grandmother had anticipated successors, but someone else was following the trail. His pulse surged. They were not first. The dark night of the soul settled in during the descent to a secondary ridge. The fog thickened, reducing visibility to a few feet. Every snap of twig amplified in his ears. He questioned himself. Was he prepared for what lay ahead? Could he honor the legacy without falling prey to the same threats? Doubt gnawed at him, the kind that creeps quietly until it freezes every motion. Tango sensed it, pressing close, brushing against his leg, offering grounding. Lucas closed his eyes, briefly inhaling the scent of wet stone and cedar. Memories of battlefield losses, flashed friends, mentors, the cost of hesitation. Yet here, hesitation meant more than survival. It could mean losing the truth forever. He straightened shoulders, squared, resolve hardening. The path led them to a hollow carved into the mountainside. Moss-covered stones hid the entrance to a natural cavity. Lucas's breath quickened. The ledger had hinted at this. He knelt, brushing aside debris, uncovering remnants of old markings, faint symbols etched into rock still visible after decades. Tango's sniffed tail flicking with precise intention. Lucas traced the symbols with his fingers, connecting them to the letters and codes from the metal box. The network of secrets stretched further than he realized. Lightning briefly illuminated the valley below, throwing shadows across the moss and rock. Lucas felt the enormity of the task ahead. His grandmother had endured isolation and danger, maintaining the balance between revelation and concealment. He exhaled, feeling a mixture of reverence, fear, and determination. Tango nudged the box closer, a reminder whatever lay ahead, they faced it together. As night fell, the trail became treacherous. Water-slickened rocks, roots twisted beneath feet, and the mist reduced visibility to mere inches. Lucas's hands gripped the pack straps, eyes constantly scanning. Every step reminded him that the mountain held its own rules, patience, observation, and trust in instincts. Tango moved with unwavering focus, muscles coiled and ready. By midnight, they reached a narrow ledge overlooking a hidden canyon. The fog shifted in strange patterns, shapes forming and dissolving as the wind carried it. Lucas knelt, spreading out the map and documents. The X's converged here on a plateau that must contain the next set of secrets. He inhaled sharply, awareness, sharpening to every sound, distant water, shifting stone, even the faintest hum of metal. A sudden metallic echo rang from the ledge above a dropped tool, or a warning. Lucas tensed, scanning the dark while Tango growled softly. His pulse surged, adrenaline mixing with a strange anticipation. This was no longer a search. It was a reckoning. He could almost hear his grandmother's voice whispering, "Follow the trail, Lucas. Guard it well." The night closed around them, a silent canopy of danger and revelation. Lucas exhaled, pressing a hand against Tango's fur. They were at the midpoint, the threshold, where discovery became confrontation. What awaited beyond the plateau could change everything, unraveling truths, loyalties, and threats long buried. Yet one certainty remained: he would not turn back. Tango's low whine confirmed it. Together, they would face what had waited for decades in silence. The final stretch of the mountain trail was steep, slick with rain and mud, each step threatening to betray him. Lucas's boots sank into the softened earth, and he could feel the cold leaching through the soles. Tango padded ahead with measured precision, tail, low but alert nose tracing every scent that drifted down the incline. The dog's vigilance was absolute, a mirror of Lucas's own sharpened instincts. He unfolded the map again, the red X on the plateau looming ahead. The notes were sparse but deliberate, a breadcrumb trail left by his grandmother. Each symbol, each mark had been placed with care, guiding him toward a secret she had carried for decades. The thought weighed heavily. Someone else had been following these instructions too. He glanced over his shoulder. The mist clung to the forest like a phantom army, shadows, shifting eyes hidden just beyond perception. Lucas exhaled, gripping the metal box under the strap of his pack. He remembered the night in Afghanistan, the sudden explosion, the way Tango had lunged, saving him without hesitation. That trust, that bond, was now their compass. The documents he carried were proof, but they were also bait. Every decision could set off a chain of consequences, and he could no longer tell who had eyes on him. The plateau opened before them, a flat stretch of rock and sparse pines. The wind cut through the fog with a sharp edge, carrying the scent of wet stone and something metallic beneath it. Tango's stiffened ears, erect teeth, visible in a low growl. Lucas's pulse surged. He crouched beside the dog, scanning the edges of the plateau. A glint of metal caught his eye. Someone had been here. Someone had left traces, intentional or careless. The first clue revealed itself beneath a boulder, partially covered in moss, a set of keys, tarnished but intact. Lucas pocketed them carefully, mindful of every sound, every movement in the mist. The second envelope from the box contained faded photographs, showing familiar figures he hadn't expected to see: his grandmother in uniform overseeing relief efforts during the flood decades ago. Each image connected a thread between names, locations, and the X's on the map. Suddenly, the wind shifted again, carrying a distinct scent gunpowder. Lucas's chest tightened, and Tango's growl escalated into a deep warning rumble. He adjusted the flashlight, sweeping the beam over the plateau. Shadows moved with precision too controlled to be animals. Someone or more than one person was watching. He felt the adrenaline spike familiar, and electric coursing through his veins. The mountain was no longer just a landscape. It was a battlefield. Lucas crouched low, pulling the documents and map closer, matching them to the terrain. A realization struck the cache, marked on the highest ridge, wasn't just supplies or evidence. It was the culmination of decades of secrecy, proof of betrayal, proof of courage, proof his grandmother had hidden at tremendous personal risk. The midpoint reversal hit him. The entire journey wasn't just about uncovering old ledgers. It was about confronting those who had benefited from lies, those who might still enforce silence. The dark night of the soul pressed down as he scanned the plateau. He imagined the consequences, confrontation, exposure, danger to himself and Tango. Doubt whispered that he was not ready, that he might fail. The wind carried his grandmother's faint scent, mingled with pine and wet stone, and Lucas drew strength from it. She had carried the burden alone. Now he would honor that trust or falter trying. Tango circled, pawing lightly at a patch of moss near the edge. Lucas followed, uncovering a small hollow beneath the roots. Inside lay a sealed envelope, fragile and yellowed with age. He opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a brief note in his grandmother's hand: "The path is never straight. Trust your instincts, not just the map. There are eyes everywhere." Lucas swallowed hard. The warning wasn't just metaphorical, it was real. Every rustle in the fog, every shadow on the ridge could be adversary or decoy. He tucked the note into his jacket and scanned the plateau again, feeling the weight of decades of secrets of obligations. Tango pressed close, steadying him, amber eyes reflecting the pale moonlight breaking through the mist. He started toward the final X, each step measured, grounded. The terrain steepened and the rocks became slicker, demanding complete focus. One misstep could send him tumbling, exposing both him and Tango. The documents in the box guided him like a lifeline, but intuition and experience carried equal weight. He sensed the rhythm of the mountain, learned to read its signs: a subtle slide of debris, a shift in fog, a distant echo of movement. Halfway up the ridge, Lucas paused to rest, placing a hand on Tango's shoulder. The dog's muscles were tense, but responsive, ready for the next maneuver. He opened the next envelope, revealing a set of coded instructions detailing hidden compartments and caches along the final ascent. The realization struck again: the journey wasn't just mapping the past. It was retracing steps meant to be protected paths that could trigger consequences if mismanaged. The plateau stretched wider fog, rolling like waves. Lucas's heart pounded not from exertion but anticipation. He realized the significance the final cache could reveal: names, evidence, and truths that powerful men had worked to erase. His grandmother's courage had laid the path. His duty was to complete it. Every memory, every scar, every lesson from Tango and the battlefield guided him forward. The night deepened. Mist thickened, obscuring the edges of the ridge. The wind howled through the pines, carrying whispers that were indistinguishable from the forest itself. Lucas adjusted the flashlight, scanning for movement. Shadows flickered, and the distant echo of footsteps or imagination made his pulse spike. Tango's growl cut through the night, warning, reassuring, synchronizing with Lucas's own heartbeat. At last, the first structure of the hidden cache came into view: a low stone foundation, partially overgrown, moss and roots entwined like nature, guarding the secret. Lucas exhaled slowly, heart racing. He knelt beside the entrance, the documents confirming the location. Tango stayed alert, scanning every corner, every shadow. Lucas pried open the hollow, revealing what his grandmother had hidden: proof of decades-long corruption, evidence meant to protect the vulnerable, to expose those who abused trust. The realization was complete. The midpoint reversal had reshaped everything. Lucas's journey was no longer just discovery. It was accountability, confrontation, and redemption. He glanced at Tango, amber eyes, steady and understood. Together they were ready to face whatever awaited beyond the plateau. The ridge narrowed further, jagged rocks cutting into Lucas's gloves as he scaled the final incline. Rain-slicked stone reflected the dim moonlight in streaks, turning every step into a gamble. Tango moved ahead cautiously, paws silent against wet rock, ears swiveling with perfect awareness. Lucas followed each breath, a measured attempt to steady the rising panic that had begun to gnaw at him. Ahead, a cluster of pines marked the plateau's edge. Lucas could feel the metallic tang in the air again, faint but unmistakable. His grandmother's instructions echoed in his mind: trust instincts over sight. The path can mislead, the wrong turn can cost more than time. He squinted through the mist. Shadows flickered, elongated by the moonlight. Movement or a trick of perception, he couldn't be sure. Tango froze mid-step, tail stiff, hackles raised. A low growl emanated deep from his chest. Lucas's pulse spiked. He crouched, hand brushing against the pack strap, feeling the weight of the metal box beneath. Every instinct screamed caution. The wind shifted, carrying a faint crunch of gravel from somewhere above the ridge. Someone had been here recently. They advanced together, step by step. Lucas pried aside moss and debris as Tango sniffed at the ground. The X on the map led them to a hollow beneath an ancient pine. A stone had been dislodged recently, revealing a shallow cavity. Lucas knelt, revealing a weathered tin box. He lifted it carefully, brushing decades of dirt and pine needles aside. Tango circled, eyes alert, growling softly at something unseen. Inside the box were envelopes, photographs, and a bronze medallion engraved with a star, tarnished but still gleaming. Lucas held it up, catching the moonlight. A letter lay atop the pile, brittle and yellowed. His grandmother's handwriting scrawled across the page. The final proof waits where the ridge meets the sky. Only the vigilant shall see it safely. Lucas swallowed hard. The final stage was here. The plateau stretched outward, an expanse of rock roots and fog. Every step was measured, deliberate. A sudden gust whipped across the ridge, carrying the scent of damp metal and pine resin. Lucas adjusted his grip on the pack in the box. Tango padded silently ahead, ears twitching, nose working. The dog stopped, abruptly growl, low and steady, fixated on a shadowy mound near the far edge. Lucas followed his gaze. The mound seemed ordinary at first, a collection of rocks and moss, but something was off. The ground around it had been disturbed recently. He approached cautiously, knife at the ready. Tango circled, nudging Lucas's leg, offering reassurance. Lucas knelt, brushing aside debris. Beneath the moss and soil lay a wooden hatch, hinges rusted but intact. His breath hitched. The documents, the map, the medallion, all had led to this. He tested the hatch with his hand. It resisted, then creaked open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. A faint metallic smell rose from below, mingling with damp earth and pine. Lucas glanced at Tango. The dog's eyes were unwavering, body coiled, tail low but stiff. No hesitation. Descending the ladder groaned, each rung echoing in the confined space. The air grew colder, heavier, charged with something he couldn't identify. Shadows clung to corners. The beam from his flashlight cut through the gloom in narrow slices. Lucas's mind raced, piecing together clues from the envelopes, photographs, and medallion. Someone had protected this for decades, and now it was up to him to ensure it survived. Halfway down, the sound of movement echoed faintly below. A rhythmic metallic tap, like footsteps on metal. Lucas froze, hand on the hilt of his knife. Tango growled, low ears, flat tail stiff. The warning was unmistakable. Someone else had reached the cache first. Lucas's mind spun through strategies: confront, observe, retreat. Each option carried risk. He swallowed hard and descended further. The ladder ended in a cavernous space walls, lined with wooden crates and filing cabinets. Dust motes floated in the pale light from his flashlight. Envelopes and ledgers lay scattered, some torn, others intact. Lucas's eyes widened. This was more than evidence, it was history preserved, hidden from prying eyes for decades. Tango padded forward, sniffing each crate, circling Lucas. A low growl directed toward a shadow at the far end of the room. Lucas's pulse spiked. He scanned the cavern. Moonlight filtering through a small grate revealed a figure motionless, observing. Lucas gripped the metal box knife in the other hand. Every muscle tensed. The confrontation he had feared now loomed directly in front of him. He took a slow breath. Every step, every decision until now had led here. The midpoint reversal had set the stage. Discovery became confrontation. The dark night of the soul loomed, pressing on him, the possibility of loss, failure, or betrayal. Yet Tango pressed close, constant, steady. Lucas nodded. Together they would face whatever waited in the shadows. The cavern felt alive, almost aware of their presence. The secrets hidden here, guarded for decades, would not remain buried for long. Lucas adjusted the flashlight, swept it across the room. Every crate, every document, every shadow carried weight. Tango growled again, warning of movement, affirming readiness. A faint metallic clink echoed near the far wall. Lucas's pulse thundered. The final phase of their journey was beginning, proof, danger, and truth intertwined. He took a step forward, metal box pressed to his chest, Tango at his side, and descended into the unknown depths where the legacy of decades waited to reveal itself. Lucas's breath came in ragged bursts as he pressed forward, every step on the slick rocks threatening to betray him. Tango moved in perfect sync muscles, taut eyes scanning the shadows. The faint glow from the moon revealed a figure emerging from the mist, tall, broad-shouldered, a silhouette against the fog. Lucas froze hand on his knife, heart hammering. The figure raised a hand slowly, revealing a pistol gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Tango growled, low warning but unwavering. Lucas counted the seconds, every heartbeat stretching every second loaded with danger. Lucas Brooks, the figure called, voice smooth and controlled. "I see you found what I've been protecting for decades." Lucas's mind raced. The documents, the medallion, the final cache, they were all bait. He tightened his grip on the metal box. "Step away," he said, voice steady despite the pulse of adrenaline. Tango's eyes met his amber and unflinching, as if understanding the stakes in a single glance. The figure stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, the pistol lowering slightly, but still trained. "There are consequences you haven't calculated." Lucas shifted, his weight instincts guiding him. He couldn't run, couldn't hesitate. The years of training, the battles, the nights in the desert, they all converged into a single decision. "I'm not leaving," he said. "This ends tonight." The figure's gaze flicked to Tango. "And the dog?" he asked, almost amused. Tango growled low and primal, stepping slightly in front of Lucas. Lucas could feel the bond they shared, the trust that had saved him countless times. No one would threaten this now. Suddenly, a flash of movement to the side, another shadow, another threat. Lucas's pulse spiked. He shifted the box onto his back hand on the knife, every muscle coiled. Tango lunged, a blur of fur and precision, knocking the shadow back with a calculated strike. Lucas surged forward, sliding on wet rock, knife-ready eyes locked on the figure in front. A sharp metallic clang echoed through the clearing. The figure stumbled, pistol firing once, but the bullet struck the rock beside Lucas, sending sparks into the fog. Tango snapped, teeth-bared growl cutting through the night. Lucas moved with the dog, a synchronized assault, each motion honed by years of survival and instinct. The figure stepped back, reevaluating. Lucas pressed closing distance, adrenaline sharpening every sense. He could smell the cold metal of the pistol, the damp forest floor, the tang of danger in the air. Every shadow, every sound became a map, a guide to survival. Suddenly, the figure lunged forward, swinging the pistol, but Lucas sidestepped, slamming his forearm into the attacker's wrist. The pistol clattered across the rocks. Tango snapped at the legs of the second shadow, forcing it to retreat. Lucas didn't pause. He seized the moment, tackling the first figure to the ground, pinning him with every ounce of strength. "Call your men off," Lucas hissed, muscles trembling, the fog thick around them. "You won't bury this again." The attacker's jaw tightened, eyes flicking to Tango, then back to Lucas. The dog's growl was a constant, a warning and a shield. Lucas could feel the weight of decades of secrets, the culmination of his grandmother's courage, all converging in this one confrontation. Sparks from the pistol and the wet stones glinted in the pale moonlight. Every second stretched, every breath measured. Lucas's arms burned, muscles screaming, but he held fast. Tango circled, snarling at any movement beyond Lucas, alert to every shift in shadow or sound. Finally, the figure froze, realizing control had slipped. Lucas's eyes never wavered, every ounce of focus directed at the man beneath him. "This ends tonight," he repeated, voice low, unyielding. The mountain around them seemed to pause, the wind, stilling the fog, hanging thick, as if the world itself held its breath for the outcome. Lucas released a measured exhale, the first since the confrontation began. Tango remained alert, tail stiff, eyes glowing in the moonlight. The first beat of the climax was over, but the plateau still held the echoes of danger, the shadows of those who would protect lies. Lucas knew the next moves would be even harder, every decision more consequential, every second laden with stakes that had taken decades to build. The figure lunged forward, pistol trembling in his hand. Lucas reacted, instantly sliding to the side as the bullet whistled past. Tango erupted in motion, a blur of fur and muscle lunging at the attacker's legs with precision honed over years of service. The man staggered, caught off guard by the dog's instinctive strike. Lucas pressed adrenaline, sharpening his senses. The metal box was secure on his back, but every beat of his heart told him the danger was far from over. The attacker recovered quickly, lunging again, swinging the pistol toward Lucas. The desert-trained veteran twisted, driving his elbow into the man's midsection, forcing him back. Tango barked, circling, teeth-bared eyes fixed on every move. A third shadow emerged from the mist, another accomplice, quick and silent. Lucas's pulse spiked, the map of every potential escape route in his mind. He counted steps, measured distance. Tango growled low and steady, signaling Lucas to adjust. The bond between them was a silent language. Every motion synchronized, every movement deliberate. The lead attacker recovered from the initial strike and aimed for the metal box. Lucas intercepted, pivoting to shield it while his hands fought for the knife. A metallic clang Tango had knocked the pistol from the attacker's grip, sending it spinning across the rocks. The second shadow hesitated, reassessing, and Lucas seized the moment. Sliding forward, knife poised, he forced the first attacker to the ground, pressing his forearm against the man's chest. Tango snapped at the second shadow's feet, driving him back toward the mist. Lucas could feel the strain in his muscles, the heat of exertion, but he didn't falter. This was the culmination of everything, the decades of vigilance, the lessons from desert nights, the guidance from his grandmother's notes. A sudden roar of wind swept through the ridge, carrying with it the scent of wet pine and metal. Lucas's grip tightened on the knife. Tango planted himself between Lucas and the remaining shadow, growling like the storm itself had taken shape. The figures exchanged a glance, understanding the tide had shifted. Lucas's eyes never left the lead attacker. "You don't get it," the man's spat voice strained defiance in his pale blue eyes. "This doesn't belong to you." "It does now," Lucas said, voice low but unwavering. "And you'll take what comes if you don't leave it alone." Tango's hackles rose, his growl vibrating through the bones. The dog lunged at the nearest threat, knocking him off balance. Lucas followed with a decisive strike, driving his elbow into the attacker's shoulder, forcing him to drop to his knees. The remaining shadow fled into the fog, but Lucas's gaze stayed fixed, alert for any return. The lead attacker struggled, coughing, blood staining his sleeve. Lucas pressed forward, each step measured a combination of calculated aggression and controlled force. He drove the man back against the rock's forearm, pressing into his chest, knife poised but ready for restraint if necessary. Tango circled, vigilant ears swiveling to the slightest sound. Finally, the lead attacker froze, realizing he had lost the advantage. Lucas's chest heaved, heart pounding, every muscle trembling, but his grip did not falter. Tango stood beside him, unwavering, a silent guardian and partner. The plateau was silent, except for their breaths and the distant rustle of the mist-laden pines. Lucas exhaled, slowly pressing the metal box to his chest. Tango's growl softened but remained a reminder that the threat was neutralized, not gone. The attack had tested everything: skill, courage, instinct, and trust. Together they had held. The final proof, decades in hiding, was safe in their possession. The moon broke through a patch of clouds, casting silver light across the ridge. Lucas allowed himself a moment to survey the plateau. Every shadow had been accounted for, every threat measured and repelled. Tango's paw brushed against his leg. The dog's eyes met his, steady, calm, and unwavering. Lucas whispered more to himself than to the dog. "We did it, buddy. We held the line." Tango barked softly, a single affirmation. The night was far from over, but the first wave of danger had passed. The plateau's secrets, now protected, awaited the final step, the summit where his grandmother's legacy lay, waiting, the truth at last ready to breathe. With a deep breath, Lucas adjusted his pack, checking the map and the box. Tango nudged his leg, signaling readiness. Together they would ascend the final ridge, carrying not just evidence but the weight of decades of courage, vigilance, and the bond forged in countless trials. Every step forward was deliberate. The wind howled, carrying the scent of pine, metal, and rain-soaked stone. Tango led slightly ahead, sensing threats Lucas could not yet see. The plateau, once an obstacle, now became a stage, each shadow a potential hazard, each rock a calculated step. Lucas allowed his thoughts to drift briefly to the lessons learned, the nights of solitary vigilance, the nights spent chasing down instincts in foreign deserts, the guidance of a grandmother whose foresight had prepared him for this very moment. It all converged here, at the edge of discovery and confrontation, where courage and instinct would decide the outcome. The ridge ahead rose sharply, a final obstacle. Lucas adjusted the metal box, checking the weight against his back. Tango sniffed, the wind ears swiveling. Lucas nodded, a silent agreement passing between them. The decisive action had secured the plateau, but the ultimate test, the summit, the truth awaited. Step by step, they pressed forward, aware of every creak, every rustle. The night carried a tension that made the hair on Lucas's neck rise, a pulse that seemed synchronized with Tango's own alertness. The plateau behind them was safe. The ridge ahead demanded precision, courage, and trust. Every second mattered. Every breath was a choice. Lucas whispered one last time to Tango, "Almost there, boy. Almost home." The first light of dawn spilled over the ridge, soft and golden, brushing the charred remnants of the plateau and the edges of the narrow trail Lucas and Tango had conquered. The forest exhaled a quiet hum of life returning. Birds began to call tentatively from the pines, insects stirred in the underbrush, and a gentle breeze carried the mingled scents of wet stone, pine resin, and distant snow. Lucas sank to his knees on the cool earth, pressing the metal box to his chest. Tango sat close-tail, brushing against his leg, eyes vigilant but calm. For the first time in years, the weight of the world seemed to settle not on his shoulders but in his hands where it could be managed, understood. Memories of deserts, firefights, and nights waiting for the slightest sound now seemed like distant echoes overlaid by the pulse of triumph and relief. He opened the box one final time. Inside, the ledgers, letters, and proofs of courage and deceit rested quietly, now safe. Lucas traced the edges of the papers, imagining the life his grandmother had led here, decades of secrecy, vigilance, and quiet heroism. Each fold, each note a testament not to fear but to love and foresight. He thought of the countless nights she must have spent alone preparing for dangers unseen, and of the countless decisions that had shaped the path he now walked. Tango nudged his hand, leaning into him, and Lucas smiled, feeling a warmth that had been absent for too long. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the valley below. Mist lifted slowly, revealing rivers and forests stretching like a living painting, silent witnesses to the past and guardians of the future. Lucas allowed himself a long, steady breath, tasting the pine-tinged air, the damp earth, and the faint smoke of distant campfires. Rising slowly, he swept his gaze across the horizon. Every step forward had been deliberate, every breath earned. The plateau, once a battlefield, now felt sacred. He tucked the box safely in his pack. "We did it, boy," he whispered. "We carried it home. And now, we carry her story forward." Tango barked softly, tail-wagging eyes, shining with recognition and loyalty. Together, they began the descent, moving with care but purpose. The mountain had tested them, shown them the weight of truth, and now offered a path back to peace. Each stone underfoot, each gust of wind seemed to remind Lucas of the trials they had endured and the resilience that had carried them through. At the base, Lucas paused, taking in the valley one last time. The morning light danced across the river, catching the shimmer of dew, the gentle sway of grass. He breathed deeply, inhaling the pine, the earth, the air that had carried danger, courage, and now clarity. He let himself linger on the quiet, watching Tango's ears twitch, his gaze steady and unwavering. A single image remained in Lucas's mind. Tango, sitting beside him, ears alert, head tilted, as if listening to a story only he could understand. Lucas smiled through the quiet understanding that some truths were not merely found, they were protected, nurtured, and passed on. And in that moment, Lucas knew they had fulfilled the promise of courage, loyalty, and redemption. The ridge behind them glowed softly in gold, the forest alive with life, but quiet enough to let the memory of what had been and what had been safeguarded settle into the bones. Lucas exhaled. "We made it home, Tango," he said. And for the first time in decades, hope didn't feel fragile. It felt enduring, grounded in the bond between them and in the story they had preserved.